Hi, hello, my lovely 어른이들. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about how I have been maintaining my Korean and how I've been learning Korean in the correct grammatical way. First off, right now I'm going to show you the books that I have used and are still continuing to use to maintain my Korean and to fix the grammatical errors that I make most of the time. Now, these come in different levels in these books that they've published. There's one where you can do my weekly Korean vocabulary, and these I bought these myself. So they weren't sponsored, by the way. This one comes in two sets. I think there's book 1 and there's book 2, but there's over 1,600 everyday sample expressions that you can learn from this book, but it's based on the Korean vocabulary that is normally used in daily life routines. This one is a small handbook that you can use, and it's fairly easy to read through, and it has a lot of expressions, but it's very short and very simple and very minimal. So if you want to do something really quick and you just want to glimpse through it and just kind of just go through it really quickly, then you could use that handy little book. So Talk to Me in Korean, these books come in different levels, and they start with level 1 and I think they go up to level 10. I have level 9 and 10. I actually physically went to the bookstore, and I checked through all the levels from 1 to 10, and I figured level 9 and 10 were more fit for my needs. And it's very important when you go to a bookstore to pick up a book that you need to learn something new, to make sure that you know exactly what your needs are and that these books fulfill those needs. The Talk to Me in Korean series, they did really help me kind of review the Korean language and review the expressions that I would normally use with my parents or my parents-in-law or with my husband or even with my children. And especially when I talked in Korean to my students. Now, here's the thing. Those books are great if you have just started learning Korean and you're making your way up the graph of your level skills, whatever you want to call it. However, if you have been learning Korean for a while, like me, and you feel like you're more towards the advanced side and you don't have somebody to talk to and use the stuff that are in those books, it's just learning something in words academically, and that's it. So for example, if you want to learn how to play hockey, and by the way, I chose hockey because I'm Canadian and I'm a big Canucks fan. If you're going to learn how to play hockey, you got to have a hockey stick, you have to have all the gear, the helmet, the skates, and you got to be out there on the ice rink and physically learn how to play hockey. You can manage to learn the rules of how to play hockey through your coach and listen and read through those rules and regulations of hockey. But in order to physically go out there and play hockey, you physically have to move. And I feel like it's the same thing with learning a language. You physically have to move your mouth and talk to someone and put it into action if you want to really get up there, like high and reach that peak, be like 정점을 찍다, right? Yeah. Because I'm an English teacher and a coach, I have to describe certain things in Korean about learning English. I have trouble doing that sometimes. And so what I did was I took the approach of purchasing a book that was written in Korean that teaches you English, and I learned Korean through this book. Oh, by the way, 주지우 선생님, I love this book. In this book, he talks about different ways in the grammatical approach of English that you can learn and understand why English is said or written grammatically in this way. So for me, as a learner who is trying to learn Korean and try to figure out the things that I can explain in Korean to my students, I went through all of the stuff that he wrote in Korean and focused more on the Korean aspect instead of the English aspect, because I already know all this stuff in English, right? And I can explain it in English, but I just can't explain it in Korean. This book really helped because 주지후 선생님 explains everything everything in such a very simple and minimal way that I was able to understand everything. And I kind of thought I would have been able to understand what he was trying to say, even if my Korean skills were a little bit lower than what it's at right now. When it comes to grammatical errors in Korean, 맞춤법, okay, the way you coordinate your letters, 돼 as IE or as OE, like all those things get so confusing once you get to the intermediate level, okay? Because you use it every single day. You don't know exactly, well, I didn't know, you might know, but I didn't know exactly when to use which one. And Caden, my husband, Caden used to teach me those things when he had time, but now that he's really busy, he just doesn't correct me on anything anymore. So here's a book that I found that is initially made for elementary school students. This book has you tracing letters with the correct grammatical structure of the Korean language and uses words and expressions that are mostly used in the elementary school level. And these words and phrases are from elementary school textbooks. However, this also helped me as an adult learning Korean to fix the simple, most common errors that I was making. All right, so I'm just going to show you a little bit of the inside. So this is what it looks like. Basically, it's just words and expressions that you trace, but as you're writing it out, it tells you how these words can be used in sentences and which way you write it or you spell it out in terms of English, like the spelling structure, is correct. So you can say 쓰레기, which is 아이, but the correct way is 쓰레기, which is 어이, right? These kinds of things. And this book, I think I got the most out of this book out of all the books that I studied Korean with. Who wrote this book? I think it was 권 작가님. But this comes in 2 different books. So this is one of the books that he has out, and there's another one you can do. But this one really helped me with my writing.
교실에서를 뭘 쓸 수 있을까? 교실에서 비키는 교실에서 뛰지 않는다. 교실에서.
And by drill training with this book, doing it over and over and over again, this is my child's book. This is Josh's book, but I have my own book, but I can't find it. So I just picked this one up because I wanted to make this video really fast. And through this book, I think I got the most out of this book. Out of all the books that I studied with, out of all the expressions and vocabulary words that I reviewed, that I wrote down, that I was reading out loud, out of everything, this one, I got my bang for my bucks. Now, the way I try to study different types of expressions and words and make sure I'm saying it correctly and that I'm delivering the message and opinion correctly and exactly the way I want it to be delivered is by getting it checked by someone. And when we teach English, we say this to a lot of our students. You have to get your writing, your pronunciation, your reading out loud intonation, and everything checked by a teacher so that you know what is being done correctly and if you're delivering your message exactly the way you want it to be delivered, delivering the meaning of what you're saying exactly the way you want that person to understand it. Another thing I noticed that I do every day that I really didn't notice that I do every day is I ask a lot of questions. I ask Sharon, I ask Ashley, I ask Mama Monkey, I ask Carl, which is 유학규 선생님, I ask my husband Caden, I ask my mother-in-law, I ask a lot of questions about Korean and if I'm saying it right or if I'm saying it wrong. I ask them, is this right? And usually the people who I ask these questions to are kind enough to explain it to me in terms of a variety of ways you can say the phrase that I ask them about. But here's the thing. When I ask a question or if I'm corrected by someone about a certain phrase or something I said, is like with this one time I said something in a YouTube video and a student of mine sent me a message saying, I think you meant this instead of this. And when I have those moments, I write all of that down. I find that phrase that I used that was incorrect. I find the meaning, the definition, and I write that all down in my notebook. And then I write down the correct way of saying it, or that I meant to say. And I write the meaning and example sentences of that phrase as well. I keep track of everything. I keep a record of everything. And when I have time, I flip through those notes and that notebook or record and see if I can recall what I did use and what I was supposed to use, and see if I use the correct version now. Going through all of these books that I used to learn Korean and to review my Korean and see if I was, expanding my Korean, like how I tell my students to expand on their English, I noticed that when I get corrected by people and when I'm interacting with people, that sticks to me more and stays with me and I remember it better than the stuff I learned through books and writing and academically learning. Exposing myself to Korean and absorbing the language through people worked a lot better than book. Well, the 초등 맞춤법 완주 따라쓰기 is an exception, because that one really helped. You're not going to increase the fluency of the language that you're learning if you're not using it and you're actively recalling the information that you have learned before. New information can be put into your brain, but the storage space in our brain is limited, just like a hard drive. So the more you reuse the stuff you have already learned, the better. 오늘도 행복하고 즐거운 영어뿐만이 아니라 모든 언어의 공부를 하시기를 바래요. I'll see you next week. Bye. Oh, so many books. 아니 이제 한국어도 안 되고 영어도 안 되고 이거 어쩌자는 거야. 진짜 샤론 언니 말대로 라틴어를 배워야 되나?